Starting recording. All right. Well, welcome to the NFHP project tracking system database training. Today, we're going to just start by giving a little bit of background about the data system and how we got here, and then we will kind of go over the actual form itself and some other features. Let me share my screen. All right. Oh, let me switch. Can you all see my screen? Great. Getting a thumbs up. So because I have my screen up, if you have a question, use the raise hand function because it'll flag it a little bit more for me moving forward. So here's the outline of the training. I'm hoping this will take about an hour. We're going to go over a little overview of the data system, the training documents, and then a few of the different applications that we're going to use during the training, which include your FHP specific dashboard, the online project entry form. We're going to walk through and demo that. And then we'll give you a quick tour of our data summary dashboard, which is currently for internal use only. And you'll have access to that because you have a login through ArcGIS Online. And then we'll do questions, and then, I can give you a few minutes or a little bit of time for some hands-on data entry if you like. And one of your tasks right now is to update your FY22 and FY23 projects in the system. And so if you want to take a little bit of time, I know, both of you are relatively new, and so tracking down information about those projects might take a little bit. Otherwise, you can just kind of do a dummy entry, and we can always delete that. And all of your proposed FY24 projects are already in there because they were entered March 31st. But if you want to take a look at those and you kind of use that to walk through, that works as well. So just a little friendly reminder that this is a new system, and so we may still find some bugs, and that's super helpful. We'll do our best to fix them, and but just letting me know if you run into anything is helpful. And if you're ever working on this and you run into a bug, what's really helpful for me is sending me a screenshot of the error that you're receiving or the section that you're having a problem with, because we all use different language to describe questions and problems. It's easy. It helps me to have an image of what the issue is. So feel free to email me and send that screenshot. So for this training, though, feel free to use the chat for questions and raise your hand. This is pretty casual, so we can always pause if I'm going through something too quickly, raise your hand or just speak up and let me know. And we're going to really try to focus on the database training. There's lots of nuances of NFHP, and they all come up with what we're talking about with the database. But we're just going to try and get through the database training today. And then just kind of a fun thing to remember why we're all here. I know we're doing data entry right now, but it's really reporting on all the successful work that the FHPs are doing. And I'm wondering, can you two guess where this restoration project is? Does this look familiar to you?
I see a lot of evergreen. I'm guessing West Coast.
What'd you say, Max?
Nisqually.
Yeah.
Nisqually.
Nice.
I have the benefit of having lived down there and having driven past that so many times.
Very totally cool. Where is it?
It's Nisqually River Delta, so north, basically between Olympia and Tacoma.
Got it. Very cool.
And
Closer to Olympia.
Closer to Olympia. And what's really cool here is that this was a big kind of levee, or I guess should say dike removal project, where they're tidally reconnecting the estuary. And so you can see on the right the area that is kind of in the process of being reconnected. It was totally shut off before. So you can see the creek starting to meander again and channels and things like that. So yeah, pretty big project. Obviously, there's still a barrier with the giant I-5 highway on the south side, but just a reminder that part of the database is trying to report on metrics of success like this. And when we roll them all up, they're really powerful when we think about NFHP as a whole. So, data entry, but think of the big picture of what we're working towards when we're doing this. So just a quick overview. So 20 fish habitat partnership coordinators have gone through this training this year because we did a large technology upgrade for how you enter the database and the whole data system itself. So we're using Esri out of the box products to put this data system together. And so the online form that you'll be using is a survey 123 online form. It's really commonly used in the field to collect data, but I'm using it a little bit in a non-traditional way to track project information. All the data is hosted in ArcGIS Online, so it's hosted in the cloud. We do download versions of the database to keep on our server, but we've set it up so, if you edit anything, we have, it goes through review before, it changes anything in a major way. So, don't worry about it. And I'm the only person that is able to delete things, so you won't be deleting anything. So just wanted to give you all that security about how it's backed up and how it's hosted. And one of the major things that has changed is the reporting portion of it. In the past, it was just a data entry system and a SQL database in the back end, and any type of data summaries I had to do. But every time you enter a project and submit a project, you'll receive an emailed project report, both if you submit a new project or if you updated an already existing project. We're going to have an internal dashboard, which you can use to summarize your project information and kind of review what you've entered. In the future, there will be a public-facing dashboard, and that'll be kind of a QA/QC version of the data that you're entering. I'm going to create basically a hub, which is a website that will be a landing page for all NFHP database information, all of your individual FHP dashboards, the data summary dashboards, training documentation, this video, things like that. So just easy access for everything in one place. But that's a work in progress, and we'll have that in the future. This is a quick view of what the data entry form looks like, and we're going to look at this live in a little bit, so I'm not going to go through anything, but basically it has 12 sections, and within that are, some of them are pretty simple, some of them are a little bit more complicated. The places that have been most challenging so far are definitely the organizational roles and financial contributions, as well as the metrics. And that's probably the most detailed version, and detailed sections there. You'll notice a star next to a category or a section overhead, and that just means that within this section there are required fields. And so most of the sections have required fields, And if I'll show you what that looks like, but on the actual field itself, there'll be a little red star. So you'll know what fields are required. If you try to submit the form without entering that information, it will bring you back and you'll have to go and update that. A few of these at the end are optional, but really beneficial. Here's just a screenshot of the detailed project reports. And, you know, they're pretty basic. They come in a Word document. So if you wanted to, you know, add your logo, if you wanted to share these more broadly or update them, you can edit them yourself and then perhaps create a PDF or something like that. But this is a really nice summary document with basically everything that you've entered about the project. You know, in the future, we're going to work to maybe have more like a one-page fact sheet. But I think we'll work on that all together to see what FHPs would be interested in. But that is something that I hope to have in the future as well. So here is an example of what your dashboard looked like. You both have logged in, so you will be there and we'll go over kind of each of the features of the dashboard in just a minute. Here is the summary dashboard. This will look a little bit different now because more projects have been entered, but we'll go over this towards the end to give you a little bit of a walkthrough, but you're more than welcome to play with this and use it to summarize your information. But it does show all of the Fish Habitat Partnership projects that have been entered so far into the new database. So what you'll need today, we've already logged in, and I sent you an email probably about 9:45 with these couple documents. And Holly, I did send it to your forum email just as a heads up, but hopefully you have those. And then there's also, in addition to those 2 Excel spreadsheets, just for you to have as reference, is a frequently asked question document that I've put together just from the data entry that folks have done so far. We're kind of consistently seeing the same questions asked. And so I've put that into for you all to reference. I do plan on having a longer document with kind of like a training manual, but we've just been doing these trainings for now and then have that frequently asked questions document. But I'll share that with you all when that's done as well. So I'm going to pause there and take any questions before we kind of get started with the form and data entry itself.
Sorry if I take a 1-minute break.
Nope, no problem.
Yeah, everybody safe.
Yeah, no problem. Holly, I see you raised your hand.
Yes, ma'am. Do you mind quickly forwarding those 2 Excel spreadsheets to my NRC email?
No problem.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yep. There you go. Just sent it.
Awesome.
And we won't go through the spreadsheets in detail today, but they are an important reference. One of them is the database dictionary, which is basically just, it's a couple of things. It's a list of database fields, all the fields in the database, because there are a lot of fields, and just the field length, stuff along those lines, and then whether or not they're required.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other spreadsheet, the metric spreadsheet, is a list of the national conservation priorities and the metrics underneath them. Because right now, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, you select a national conservation priority, and then it basically filters down to get the metric that you want to get at. And so I wanted you to have this as a reference so you know where, if you're talking about like area of habitat restored, which NCP would that fall under? So it's a little bit of a cheat sheet for you all to use when you're entering those metrics.
That's great. Thank
Great.
you. That's really help break a really big problem down into smaller, more achievable tasks, which is great.
Great. All right. Well, with that said, I'm going to switch over to basically the data entry portion of the training. So I'm going to pull up a dashboard, but if you both can go to your dashboards on your computer, that would be great. Share my screen again so you can follow along. With what I'm doing. And just an FYI, I do find when I'm sharing a screen and running Teams that everything goes a little bit more slowly than I'd like it to. But we'll go from there. So right now I have what I call like the SuperAdmin Dashboard version, but it's very similar to yours. On the left, you'll see a list of all the projects, and you're looking at the project list specific to your fish habitat partnership. I'm looking at all of the projects here, and on the right is a map of project locations, and you can see that they're listed currently by status. So you can see the reddish color is our active projects. The purple point is a proposed project. Green is completed and blue is completed and green is delayed. So that you can visually see which projects are active and which have been completed. And just to note, this is right now just FY 24, 22, and 23 projects in here. And we're working to transfer all of the older projects into this new data system. It's just a slow task. So kind of a major lift, but I'm hoping to have those all in there pretty soon. And then you'll all be able to review any project from the history of your FHP this way. So as a quick tour, at the top left corner here, you can search by project name. So I'm just going to put in here, and as you type in the title, you'll start to see the filter come up below. And if you want, you can select that project and it will filter it both on the left and in the map. To close out of that, just press the X next to the search field. Another thing that you can do is sort by project name, fiscal year funded, fiscal year proposed, or project status. So sometimes it's helpful to filter by fiscal year funded to get a list organized that way, or project status, whatever you're looking for, and then it organizes. So all of the proposed projects are on top, and the long list for all the NFHP funded projects right now. So I won't scroll down, but that's a simple way to just kind of organize. And then you can also view projects in a table, and you can also export all the projects to a CSV file if you want a list of all your projects and the information about your projects in Excel or CSV. Up in the top right hand corner, if you want to add a new project, you would click Add Project, And I'm going to do that right now. And if you two want to do that, feel free, or you can edit an existing project. That is how you do it. I'll go back to the dashboard quickly. If you want to be able to edit an existing project, you would edit a project that way, and it will pull up information about that existing project. So I'll pause there. I went through that pretty quickly. Do you have any questions so far? Okay.
Sorry,
I'm gonna.
I raised my hand.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it.
What is the, because I clicked on the edit saved project link, and so
Yeah.
does that allow you to do the same thing just with extra steps as just clicking edit on a project that's already there?
So that's a great question. And the way that I'm going to explain it, and I think I need to work a little bit on how to title this. But when you're working in the form, um, the only true way to really save a project, and if you're adding a new project and you want to save it, is really to submit the project information. That said, you'll notice in the top left corner um, that it'll say saved. So as you're working, as you're entering information, it is saving the work that you're doing. So if for some reason your computer crashed or your browser closed, um, it would have saved that kind of most recent project that you're working on. And so if you came back in and you accidentally closed out of your browser before submitting the project, if you came back in and you clicked edit saved project, it would go to that most recent project that you were working on. And so I need to work on how to title this. But what was happening is folks were working on it, and then they didn't submit it, and they needed to get back to that most recently edited project. Once you submit once you submit a project, it is saved in the database. But as you know, there's some required fields, and so you can't submit the project information until you filled out all those required fields. I'm going to talk about a way to get around that. If you want to just create, kind of a basic shell of a project, submit it, and then go back and edit details later, that's probably a good move. But that's just basically a temporary save of what you've been actively working on. Does that make sense?
And it's only, yeah, it's like, well, I mean, I play a lot of video games, so it's kind of like it just opens your most recent autosave file, but it's only for, like, it's not like it's going to save individual projects that you're working on. It's only like the most recent autosave slot, basically.
Exactly. And
Cool.
what I haven't tested is if you opened up 10 projects. I don't know how it would handle, like what it would call your most recent. I don't know if I'd suggest doing that. I would say work one at a time. But you probably could open 10 tabs with 10 different projects. I don't think that's the intention of how this was meant to be done. But technically, you could go crazy and do that. So, but it is actively saving. So if you did accidentally close this, you could easily get back to that saved project information. So
Yeah, that makes total sense.
let me just close out of that and see. This is a test project. So, um, and you might have noticed when I clicked on that, it gave me an option to open in a browser or in the browser or in an app. And you can download an app on your iPad or your Android device and for Survey 123 and log in, and you can do this in a tablet of your choice if that's what you want to do. I'm doing the training in the browser because I think most people are probably going to enter the information on their computer. But maybe at nighttime is when maybe you just want to sit in front of the TV and enter project information on your tablet, however you want to get your work done. It's an option. So that's what that is. That's a great question. So maybe a challenge to you both. You don't have to answer me now, but if you can think of a term that I could put here that would make it more recognizable, um, edit most recent project, something like that. I'm trying to figure out how to best communicate that in the dashboard. So
You like
we're
edit most recent draft or something. I don't know.
yeah,
That's the only spitball I could think of, but I'll think more.
draft is a good term. Great. Yeah. Think on it. All right. So now that we have kind of gone over this, and you'll notice that there's a couple things at the bottom of my dashboard that you don't have yet. If there are any, what these are for me are filters. So I can filter by all projects for 2023. I can add things like this to your dashboard as well. I didn't do it all in the beginning because I wanted to hear feedback on what would be most helpful. But if there are filters or things that you think would be helpful for you to be able to do really quickly and you want to do often, let me know and we can add that feature to your dashboard at any time. So that type of feedback is appreciated too. Um, you know, I'm working with all the FHP information. So, you probably don't need that type of filter, but perhaps you want the fiscal year filter um, or something like that. So just keep that in mind when you start working on this. The last thing about this dashboard at the top um, is this home will take you back to this dashboard. This is an empty link right now, but we'll bring you to the NFHP hub once it's developed. And this dashboard link we'll use later, but it does bring you to that internal dashboard for summarizing information. And we'll go over that in a little bit. So perhaps you can follow along with me, or you can open up the form itself. You can add a new project or edit an existing project to see how information is entered. I'm, for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through every single field because it's way too much. I want you all to learn the, you know, the basic function of how you add information. Some of it is open text fields, but some of it is a little bit more complicated than that. So I want to focus on those pieces of information that are a little bit more challenging, but we will go through this beginning section first altogether, just the general project information. You'll notice here next to project name, there is a star, and that is the indicator that that is a required field. So you'll see this in a few different places. And, I encourage you to follow basically the order of this form when you're entering information, because this form is what's considered a smart form. What you choose here, if I choose PMEP, the rest of the responses in the form are going to be tailored to PMEP responses. The same, for yours. So obviously you're not going to probably enter a project about somebody else, but make sure, especially in this beginning section, general project information, that you fill this out first, because project status, so, I chose PMEP as the sponsor. We don't need to go through what all these fields mean, but project status, if it's an active project, another field pops up, and this is an important piece of information because if it's a NFHP funded project or a NFHP supported project, that's pretty relevant. And if you want details about what each of those are, you can expand the details section here. So if you're ever wondering a little bit more about the field, you can find more details in some of these that need a little bit more explanation. But basically, a NFHP funded project is a project funded by NFHP congressional funds. A NFHP supported project is a project that may have received funding from another source. So for PLCI, we consider the BPA funded projects NFHP supported projects. And that is because you, as the coordinator, support the kind of funding and implementation, not implementation, but funding process associated with those. And so NFHP funding is supporting these other projects. And so NFHP doesn't, when we total the amount of funding that, NFHP has funded $5 million, we don't include those supported projects there, but it really does start to show the leverage of the program and the benefit of the coordination funds and how much farther they extend for the NFHP program.
Okay,
NFHP.
So in the case of PLCI, all of our BPA projects also go into the tracking database because if they are NFHP supported.
Yeah, and we're
Okay.
we're encouraging you to do that. We're not requiring you to do that. And just that is how actually it's been done in the past for PLCI. Really, you want to focus on the NFHP funded projects, but this is a great place to track other information. That said, your BPA funded projects aren't going to have all the same information requirements that NFHP does. And so there might be some required fields that you just need to say not applicable or something like that to get, to be able to enter it. But yeah, this is a database that's your tool that you can enter and track information, and it'll be legacy for years to come. And then when we want to create a map of all PLCI projects, I can create a map of all of your projects, not just your NFHP funded projects or something like that. So it is helpful to have both in there, but I know it is work to enter information. So just a little bit of detail on that. You can enter fiscal year proposed, fiscal year funded. So right now we're having folks when they propose. So on March 31st, everybody proposed FY24 projects. And so they entered FY24. When they get funded, we'll make sure to update this to say that they were funded in 2024. That seems obvious. Sometimes projects are proposed in FY24. They don't receive funding in FY24, but then they end up receiving funding in FY25 or something like that. So, we're trying to track that type of information. And so that's just a simple way. Holly?
Yeah, I noticed that fiscal year funded is a required section. Do you put like a placeholder value in there if you're, I guess that would change. So if instead in RFP process, it was a proposed project, would that no longer be a required field since we don't know that they are funded yet? Okay.
Exactly.
Answered my own question. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah. And so, yeah, if you choose project proposed, actually all of the drop down for RFP status updates. And really March 31st, the one you really need to pay attention to is proposed from NFHP to NFHP board. But we do have the ability to update kind of the status along the way. So actually on my to-do list is all those proposed FY24 projects. They've been proposed FHP to NFHP board. the NFHP board has actually proposed them to DOI. And so I can update the status to show that those projects are in progress moving forward. But you'll only need to enter the proposed year. So, you know, that is an important piece of the SMART form, is to kind of follow the form and fill out these pieces of information. So then you get to the right, you know, so then it's activating the right information. And active projects and proposed projects also look a little bit different below. This will also update if you have project completed. You'll have all three fields: fiscal year proposed, fiscal year funded, and then month and year completed. So, you know, you get the more it changes along the way, the more things change and the more fields appear. So that's kind of an important place to start each time you come to update project information.
Is updating project information, for example, now that NFHP has proposed those to DOI, you mentioned that being your job. Is that traditionally your job for all FHPs, or do you ask coordinators to go through and update their project status when projects are moving through the funding train?
Through the funding train, I'll do that.
Okay.
You know, it's kind of just a nice thing to see that status change. Where we really need help is when the kind of, not the RFP project status, but when the actual project status changes. That's the piece of information that we want to know. So and actually when we get funding, and a project, you know, when a project actually goes from proposed to funded, we'll have you come in here and we'll have you change the status of those projects from proposed to active. And then the same thing, if the project has been completed, we'll have you come in here and change that as well. And then I think we'll have you do that. Hopefully it'll be on an annual basis, but if you get information from your partners, you can do that whenever you get that information. You could do an annual call for updates, a quarterly call, whatever, you know, your system is. But this is a place you can come and change it. And then annually, when NFHP asks for a report on the status of your projects, we can just export it from the database, and you can say, here's my project and here's the project status. It was completed in, you know, this month and year, and any other details that you might want to include. But keeping it updated in here is helpful, because then it's ready to go when we ask for that status report. So we'll keep moving. This section, you know, is a lot of these questions are ASACT required questions. I'm not going to go into details about what all these are, but just wanted to, this is really around project design, methods, and outreach. And then this social and ecological benefits, again, many of these are related to the ASACT. But, you know, as you're entering information, this is all helpful background on your project, especially when you're proposing projects to the NFHP board. Having information about the problem being addressed, the biological or ecological benefits, et cetera, are really helpful for not only your FHP review of the projects, but as the board is looking at projects, it's helpful to know that all these pieces of information have been considered. And something I want to point out here, which is something that is new because of the ASACT, this public access and recreational tribal fishing opportunities questions. This is new with the ASACT. So historical projects, really, we didn't need to know this information. And so if you're, for some reason, adding a historical project or updating a historical project, like a project from 2019, it would really be, you could say it provides public access if it did, but, we weren't expecting you to know that. And so there is a not applicable portion here. And I'm pointing this out mainly because of those NFHP supported projects, like the BPA funded projects. BPA doesn't require you to, to provide a status about public access of the project. So that would be not applicable. Um, the same, if you don't have details for a supported project here, first you could always write not applicable. Another note too, if you delete that and it will say, this is a required question. And an important other piece of information that you'll see in the lower right-hand corner is the character count. So these fields do have character limits. Not when you add a new project, the character count will be here tracking how many characters you've entered. You'll see it decrease as you go. But when you come in and edit a project, I don't think that appears. But if you do go over your character limit, this will turn red and give you an error saying, hey, you've gone over your character limit. And if you do try to submit the form, it won't let you submit because it really holds to those character limits. So just as a reference, all of the fields that have character limits, they do say what those are at the top. So I just pay attention when you're entering information. And especially if you're copying and pasting information, you can add a lot of characters accidentally and not know that you're adding characters. So just be careful. I'll also encourage you to just write a paragraph. Try not to report information like this project had these benefits. Enter, restored habitat. Like this is adding a lot of characters. We're not trying to add fancy formatting, just a, 3 to 4 page statement on the biological or ecological benefits is a lot easier to read and is a database is better in the database and all those extra characters and enter tabs. So I just encourage you to enter information that way. Unfortunately, that's not how it's always submitted in a proposal. So, encouraging your folks to report information like that is helpful as well. All right. So I see it's almost 11 o'clock. We scheduled till 11:30 just in case it went longer, but I'm going to show you this next section because it really sets the tone for the next few sections. And then I'm going to skip right over to organizational roles and financial contributions because this is the most complicated section and where people get stuck the most and where people get the most errors. So habitats and priority areas, these lists that you're going to populate will be specific to your FHP. So a project may be benefiting a certain habitat, or it could be benefiting a certain priority area. And these lists were all pre-populated before both of your time, and basically are determined by your FHP. If you ever need to update these lists, you just let me know and I can update them in the background of the database. But it is a really nice way to track if you're, I think for the forum, anadromous fish habitat, or I forget exactly what it is, but whatever the project is benefiting. Some projects are species specific projects. And so listing a habitat might actually not be relevant. So you can always select that this is not applicable to this project and skip right over this section. But many projects have a habitat. And so for PMEP, that is either estuaries or nearshore marine. I would select estuaries, and that's great. Projects may benefit multiple habitats. And so you can add multiple. And to do that, you go to the top here and you'll see a little add button. And again, I want to add another habitat. I select habitat and I can select nearshore marine. And you can see at the top here, it's starting to create this list of estuaries and nearshore marine environment to list the habitats. I'll pause there. I guess one more thing. If you add a habitat and you don't select anything, the form will have it won't want to submit because this habitat or priority area is a required question. So, I encourage you, if you, accidentally add one, just delete that record and make sure that those are completed because it will throw an error if you do try to submit blank habitats because they are a required question. If you want to edit something, you can always click on one or two and go through the list. For habitats, this isn't as big as of a thing, but you might have 10 species that you're benefiting. So you might need to add those. Jump in if you have any questions. I'm only seeing one of you, so feel free to just speak up if needs be. Something I want to point out with the species list, you have the ability to add individual species, or you can add a group or guild. So sometimes projects benefit all the species of the partnership, and instead of adding all potentially 20 species, you can list all PMEP species, or all forum species, or all PLCI species, and that'll come up and be listed for the project instead of having to add 20 species here. There is also the option to say this is not applicable for that project because maybe this is a habitat project and not a species project. And so it's not directly benefiting any species. If you do select a species like bat ray, you'll see this populated down here. If you see a blue section on the form and it says read only, it means that you can't edit this information. But what it's doing in the database is populating the common name, the scientific name, and the IDIS TSN, which is a national, IDIS is a national database, species database. And it's just another way for NFHP to basically create connections about the species that we're entering to a national database if we wanted to do any other type of analysis. So nothing to really worry about, just know that we are tracking this information in the background, so we could potentially in the future make species connections and have it all standardized. Okay. I said I was going to go directly to organizations and then I went to species, but any questions about what it looks like to add multiple records to a section? No. Okay. All right. Organizational roles and financial contributions. So this section, basically the goal of this section is to collect information on all the partners, all the organizations that are working on this project. And that can include funding partners, but it can also include technical assistance partners. And so you are basically going to start with selecting the organization, and then you are going to go into selecting what type of partner they are. And if they are a funding partner, it'll ask you funding questions. I'll delete this record for a second, but let's start by, and this is also the way that we would enter information about the NFHP funding for the project. So that's how I'm going to start entering that. So the organization type. As you know, NFHP tracks information about funding information about whether it's a federal or non-federal or tribal organization. So you really do, that's how we start, is by selecting that organization type. So we're going to select federal, and then it filters this list to only list federal agencies. We are looking for national or federal organizations, National Fish Habitat Partnership here. So that's what I would select. If you looked for the organization and it wasn't there, you could select Add Organization Federal, and then you can write in the new organization name. And that's the same for whether it's federal organization, tribal, non-federal, like a state agency. You can always add organizations that way. But I'm going to delete.
Like, when you choose to add an organization, or like even for like that priority area species and FHP, I guess not the FHP priority, but the species and habitat and priority areas, does that save that new entry to the list for all future projects that you add, or only for this one project entry?
So that's a great question. I'm trying to figure out a way to automatically add it to the list, but basically I have to go when I see an add species or add organization, I go in and I clean it up and I add it to the list in the future, which will then make it available to all projects. But it won't be added automatically right away when you do that. Does that make sense? Okay. So if for some reason you needed to add an organization twice, and I'll show you that scenario, you'd have to add it twice, which is a little bit annoying. But you know, when folks do a push of data entry, I then go and update and add those organizations, you know, pretty soon afterwards. So next year that organization would be on the list, but there's always going to be new organizations. And you'll notice that I typed in, you know, I started to type it into the box to make it easier for you all. So I want to go back to National Fish Habitat Partnership, the role of this organization, and you can select multiple, but NFHP is the funder. And they're providing direct NFHP funds. And I'm just going to go through this specific example, and then we'll add another organization next to show you, to explain other pieces of this information. It was NFHP congressional funding. They provided cash funds. And we estimate that they gave us $50,000 in NFHP funds, and that automatically populates the final NFHP funds contributed. When a project is complete, you might have estimated that they were going to receive 50,000, but they actually ended up receiving 70,000, and then we can track that difference. So, that is available to be able to track that. If you scroll down below, you'll see another blue read only section. This is very confusing to people. People want to be able to enter in here, but you'll notice it's red. You can't enter it. The more organizations and the more financial contributions you enter, this will total it for you. So you'll start to see these increasing as you add more records, but you can't edit this yourself. You have to, the only way to enter funding information is to add it at the organizational level. So just want to point that out. It's what makes this so kind of the most work, because you might have 5 organizations contributing to a project financially, and then you might have another project that's the project lead, a technical assistance, you know, all that jazz. So what that would look like, and I want to show this to you because it's an important piece of information. Let's say this non-federal state agency. Let's go to our Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife is actually the project sponsor or project lead. This is an important piece of information. For every project, there should be a project sponsor or project lead. And we want to make sure that one of the ASAC requirements is to talk about the expertise of that project sponsor. And so for each project, I find it helpful to maybe start out by entering the project lead or project sponsor, and then you say they are really good at removing levies. That's not I wouldn't suggest writing that, but why just a review of why that sponsor is good at doing what they're doing. So that is an ASAC requirement. Just wanted to point it out, but it doesn't appear until you choose this selector. A little bit buried. So again, you could add another funder, let's say tribal, tribal funder, matching funds. They are providing in-kind funds, and we estimate that about $10,000 in in-kind funds. So, and with that said, you'll see that we estimated 50,000 from NFHP and another 10 in non-federal match funds that are estimated. One of the questions that we've had before with this section is when you're entering your operations project, like your coordinator, we do ask you to report on the funding you receive for your coordinator role. And there is this match right now. There's this, and I'm sure you've heard about this maybe, and we won't get into this too much, but there's this idea that you need to have a 1-to-1 federal to non-federal match associated with all the projects that you enter. And so a lot of people will enter their steering committee, science and data committee, as basically in-kind support to get to that non-federal match. But depending on your partnership, that could be a lot of different groups. And so this can be the place where you start to get a lot of records, and you can accidentally add blank records. So, I just encourage you to go through and review, quickly before you submit, to make sure you don't have blank records, and to make sure that you filled out. There are a lot of required fields in here. And so just making sure that you filled out those required fields is important, or else it won't submit and it'll give you an error. So I'll pause there, and we can go through the form for maybe another few minutes, but take any questions. I think it'll be most helpful for you to just spend time entering, and we probably won't have a ton of time to do that today, but I'm available for when you need to enter information. Project location is exactly what you think it is. We want each project to have at least one kind of point associated with it. We know that some projects are better represented by a polygon, lines, or multiple points, so you can add those, but just to make sure that, you can select the geometry type best represented by a single point, multiple points, but you can, type in the latitude and the longitude here, and it'll automatically bring you to this location, which is probably in the Pacific Ocean somewhere. And there's your point, and you can fill out information about the location accuracy, whether it's generalized location or if it's precise location. Particularly, it's nice to have precise if it's a culvert or something like that. If you know those locations, that's great. If you can always, you want to drop a point on land, if your point is on land, it'll automatically populate your congressional district, state, and Fish and Wildlife Service region for where that location is. So that's kind of nice if at some point we want to summarize all the projects within a congressional district. Obviously, if it's out in the middle of the ocean, there's that doesn't exist there, but for the ones on land, it will automatically populate that. And again, this blue read only section, you can't edit it, but you can look at it. If you selected a project as best represented by multiple points or lines, you'll be able to scroll down, and you'll be able to add additional points in the same way you add species or habitats. So if you're removing 3 culverts, you might choose one as the primary, and then 2 of them can be added afterwards to track all that location. Or you can add a polygon if it's a location that's better represented by a polygon, like a wetland restoration area or something like that. Right now, there isn't a way for you, if you have a shapefile, you can't import the shapefile. It's just hand drawing the polygon. That said, I can, if it's easier for you, you can email me that information and I can upload it in the background instead of you trying to be precise looking at, a map and trying to draw it here. I'll leave that up to you, but we can work together to get that more accurate information in there. And again, these are optional, but I want to point out you can add project photos. I'm pointing this out because I really encourage you to ask for folks to send photos in like a JPEG or, some other photo file. What we've been seeing happening is that partners are sending, a series of pictures in a PDF, and that makes it really hard for you to then add the photos, because you'd have to save each individual photo as an individual file and add them that way. But this photo is nice because if you add this kind of main project photo here, it'll, in any web map or in any materials, that's a project that will be highlighted as, representing your project. You can also add a before project and after project photo, and we're hoping eventually to have some type of cool web story where we show a lot of those. But, none of this is required, just something that's really nice. You can also add project reports and documents. So a project proposal, you can add here. You can add the budget of a project, a final report, monitoring plan, press release. You can zip up a data set. It's a nice way for you to store files associated with the project. So I encourage you to do that. And you can also if it's a project report, you can enter a URL for where that project report is hosted. So super quick overview of those final sections. I'll scroll back up and just kind of pause, take any questions that you may have, and know that, I'm always available when you're working on this to answer questions by email or just jump on a Teams meeting and, you can share your screen and show me where you're running into problems. So I'll pause here.
I've got a question for you, Kate.
Sure.
Yeah, related to organizational roles and financial contributions, but applicable to the overall form. If you've got multiple projects with sort of the same organizational support, like if, for example, NOAA is supporting a lot of different projects within your FHP in one fiscal year, for fields that could be used for multiple projects, like the expertise of the project sponsor, do you tend to, is it acceptable to have the project sponsor expertise be sort of your standard copy paste response, or do you want every field customized for each project? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I'll leave that up to your discretion. I think there are places where you could do that. And that would just be a copy and paste situation. Yeah, I can, so yeah, I'll just leave that up to your discretion. I feel like it tends to be a little bit more customized for each project.
Understood.
But yeah, NOAA might be a partner on every one of your projects, but they might be a partner in different ways. They might be a funder on one, technical assistance on others. So it just looks a little different for each.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, that gives me a good feeling for how this is used. It's great.
Yeah.
Kate, I have one quick question about, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kate.
No, you go for it.
Okay. I know this maybe is more PLCI specific, but I guess for any other FHPs that would have, projects from other funding sources, like if you're adding those and you're doing the NFHP supported for that process status, for the NFHP priorities and metrics section, does that field then just automatically blank out? Because all I can, in just like kind of clicking around, I can see that if you do go into that section, the metrics are all tied to, like NFHP priorities. But I'm assuming that not always will, projects that are NFHP supported because the FHP has a NFHP coordinator. I'm wondering if those projects wouldn't align with those priorities and if that would then cause an issue.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. And what I think then maybe we would do I may just need to add something else here related to supported projects. So then you could still, you'll still be able to enter the metrics, but not tie it to a national conservation priority. And I will say for FY24 and moving forward, so the current national conservation priorities, the metrics are intentionally nested. Historically, they weren't. So if you go to NFHP 2023 or historical priorities, you still get asked a national conservation priority, but they're not kind of as well nested under the NCPs. So what you would do is fill out a metric category, like this is a on the ground metric category, NCP, and then it would list your metrics. So that's a really good question, and I'll find a flow for those supported projects where, or maybe I'll add an NCP choice that says, not applicable, and so then you could just choose that. But perhaps I just won't have those fields show, and you can just get right to the metrics, because I imagine you'll still want to enter metrics for those supported projects, just not under the NCPs. Great question.
And so, yeah, if because I think we will want to add, because it's nice to have everything in one place. But if we start adding those NFHP supported projects, then I think, yeah, I'll just default to those historical and NCPs, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, NCP 6 support the structure and function of fish habitat partnerships. Would that probably be the closest match for supporting coordination?
That is, yeah, that is a very fancy way of saying coordination.
Yeah.
And people, oh, in 2023 when we did it, I think it said FHP operations, and then folks got their hands on the language and wanted to have it be more well-rounded.
Yeah.
And so there are metrics related to organization, number of organizations, type of operation activities, things like that are very specific. I will say in the past, folks have tried to, they've thought it would benefit their project if they listed as many NCPs as possible. But I will encourage you to just add the most relevant NCPs and metrics for the project. If you want to spend the time and add every single one, but I really think there's probably 1 to 2, maybe 3, metric, NCPs relevant for a project, maybe 1, so, don't feel like you need to go down a rabbit hole and enter every single detail, but do your best to choose the top few that really represent it. And I encourage you to use this expected project, outcome, to kind of talk about what you expect to get out of the project. So, there's probably a lot of like indirect benefits to certain projects. And maybe that's really important, but I just encourage you to think critically about what you're doing and not trying to add way too many. All right. Any other questions? We're reaching 11:30, so I want to respect your time, but I also am here to answer more questions if you have them.
I think I've got one for you, Kate. Just kind of taking this and applying it to our kind of immediate roles. You mentioned adding historical projects prior to 2022 through 2024. So it sounds like you are handling that. Is there anything that's coming up right now that you know of for NFHP that we as coordinators would need to put into this database, or are we kind of in a lull right now?
Right now, so that's a great question. So right now, your 22 and 23 projects, they are in there, but they are really what I'll call a shell of a project. I didn't have any of the details of the projects. I just had the project name, the partnership, and perhaps the NFHP funding associated with it. So we are looking for partnerships to update their FY22 and FY23 projects, the status of those projects, and also the details underlying them. So the organizations, the species, the habitat, and all of the details are unfortunately not in there. And it is a lot, but it's just because we're in this transition between databases. Nobody entered FY22 or 23 into the old database, and we just found out about FY23 projects, and FY22 was kind of the in-between year. So this year is the biggest lift with entering project information, and ideally it won't be until next year that you're asked to really dig in and update the status of your 24 and propose your FY25 projects. But yeah, so that is what we're asking coordinators to do right now.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like I've definitely read that in an email, but it's very helpful to hear it directly from you, especially having seen the database. Now I'm like, oh, okay, I know what to do now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no problem. So I just want to take a quick minute and show you this dashboard. It's a work in progress. I'm sure you both have interacted with dashboards like this before. It's an Esri dashboard, and right now it is showing all 330 projects that are currently in the database, which would include the proposed FY24 projects, the FY22 and 23 projects as well. But because the details about the FY22 and 23 projects haven't been updated, some of these summaries won't be super relevant because, you know, we might know the NFHP funds, but we don't know all the leveraged funds or the match funds. But just as a quick tour, you'll probably want to filter by your FHP. So right now there's 20 projects in the database. And, you know, you'll see kind of discrepancy here because the FY22 and 23 projects need information updated. But eventually all this will be representative of those 20 projects. You could just go to 22 and see. So even the NFHP investment needs to be updated. 5 projects, and all this needs to be updated. And eventually, you know, here's the map. It filters the projects. You can click on this other tab, and when you do enter information about the NCPs and metrics, that'll appear here. I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. But you can also, you know, if you can click on a specific project, and it'll provide you all the project details. This is every field that you could want to look at. Kind of summarized for that project. Sorry for all the quick scrolling. You'll also notice that you can tab and look at the metrics for that project. There are none. Let me actually select a project that would be relevant too. Here we go. Proposed projects for the forum. If you looked at this, you'll see kind of these metric summaries of the count of projects for each NCP. Obviously, there's a lot of reconnection projects. And then for proposed projects, they propose to connect 42.3 miles and remove 32 barriers. And there were 4 science and assessment products. So it's pretty cool summary. If I click on a project, it's showing me contributions, the metrics, the project details. And so you can really start to look at kind of each of the different pieces of summary that you entered through this dashboard. And it's definitely a work in progress, but just as a different way to look at the information about each of your projects. And when you click on a project, it changes the information here. It filters the information up top about the project. It also brings up a pop-up that lists a lot of the main information in the project table. So I'm looking at all these. If you wanted to know, you know, you could search by congressional district, eventually, you know, lead organization. There's a bunch of different filters, state. So there's quite a few different filters that you can do, project category. So obviously operational support. So with that said, feel free to play around with this. You know, I'm going to be making improvements to make this more user friendly. So if there's anything that you want to be able to look at a little bit easier, let me know. But just a way for you to summarize your projects as you work on them to make sure they're kind of totaling and looking the way that you want them to look. So I'm going to pause and just stop sharing my screen for a second. And now we're already 6 minutes over. So, you know, I can answer questions or can let you go to lunch or do whatever you want to do. But thanks, guys. Great questions also. Appreciate it. Questions for me?
No, that was great. Thank you.
No questions, just it's obviously very smooth. The smart form feature is really cool. It's obvious you guys put a lot of work into that. So thank you for running through that with us. It's very appreciated.
Yeah. No problem. And I encourage you to just take it slowly the first time. I think the biggest thing, you know, people just are trying to go quickly and then don't fill out a required field, submit the form, and then, you know, for some reason, everybody does this at like 9 o'clock at night, and I'll come in the morning and I'll be like, sorry, I couldn't help you then. So that's why I made a joke about like watching TV, entering project information, because I feel like people are doing that. So, yeah, just, you know, the form is great. It is an out of the box form. And so I think somebody, a custom developer, could make it a lot prettier, probably even, you know, more user friendly. But, you know, what's great is that we can update this at any time. You know, we can make improvements to it. We're not like locked into a custom developer and paying for those changes. So, you know, there are costs to that. So I'm sure you will find things that you wish were a little bit different. And that is okay. Please let me know. But you know, that is a situation. I will say for that contributions, so organization and contribution section, I am trying to find a way to streamline that a little bit more. But so many folks are actively in here. I'm not making changes yet, but I probably will make changes over the winter because that section is a pain in the butt. So just full disclosure, I'm very aware. If you have a partner that provides both cash and in-kind contributions, you have to add them twice because so that's the thing that I need to figure out how to change.
Yeah, I wonder,
So
and this is I guess the only spitball that I'll give because we are over time, but you know, I wonder if you could change it to because you have like God, I just need to open one again where it's like binning, right? Like you can add multiple organizations to one category, and then I don't know if, and this is maybe like a limitation of the platform, but it's like, yeah, you could do, yeah, for organization, it would be, yeah, like you would pick role first, and then you could add multiple organizations to the role, and then I don't know if you could do it, but then for like if it's funding type and that kind of stuff, you would just have like cash or in kind, like organization one, cash or in kind, organization two. But that again, like then it's like you would have
yeah,
to go back and check which is one and two, and I'm sure that yeah, it's like yeah. Now that I say it out loud, I'm like, it's a bad idea.
yeah, and I do
Yeah,
I do have a way that I think I can do it. Still adding organization first, but I have to change the schema of the database, um, which would require, so I would have to do this at a downtime because I'd have
yeah,
to,
yeah,
I have all the information, you know, but it would just be kind of like, yeah,
yeah,
if you would set, if it was in kind, you could select cash and in kind, and then two different fields would appear, one representing the cash contribution, one representing the in-kind contribution. And
Yeah.
so I'd have to add specific field. Anyways, that's the way that I've imagined doing it. I was hoping to
Yeah,
make it
'cause
into
then
a table, like table data entry, but I can do that if folks were only working in the app. It doesn't work in the web browser, the table structure. So
that's weird to me.
yeah, so
I guess that's probably browser. Yeah, it's more like a browser thing. But
yeah, so
oh, I think you muted yourself, or your AirPods died. I think your AirPods died.
oh,
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
stop
Perfect.
recording too. I realized we were recording.
Oh, good.
I'm gonna cut that